to join us. That's great.
Hello, Helen
Lizzie?
joined. How are you, Brian?
Good. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Andrew, I run in that problem with the camera all the time. I've got that similar software loaded on my machine, and it's just frustrated me.
Yeah, I was testing it out. I used SnapCam and a couple of the other sort of virtual cams, and saw that one and forgot that was what I still use. I can't use any of them in Teams, which is what I usually use for my day-to-day work stuff. So,
Well, I am still struggling through with a free Zoom account. So we have a half an hour in this meeting, and then we'll get a warning that it's going to end in 10 minutes. So if we need to switch over to a second Zoom, we can do that. So I just looked at the when to meet session in the middle of last night and noticed that we had a block of time that I think 5 out of 7 people could meet. So I thought I'd go ahead and set one up. Martin, it looks like you were able to move things around. You said you were joining the last half hour. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, well, I'm from now till 1.
Okay. Oh, your first half hour. My apologies.
First half hour, yeah.
So I think at this point, really what I want to do is just share a quick PowerPoint that I built, do some introductions, and sort of kick things off with where we're at. I think we've got a mixture of xAPI knowledgeable, xAPI noob, and and LiveCode knowledgeable and LiveCode noobs. So I consider myself in the noob category for both of them. So don't be shy about telling people that you're just learning this. It's not accusation. It's more of a recognition of where we're at. So I'm setting sharing to multiple participants, and then I'm going to share my desktop. Like I said, I was able to pull up some PowerPoint just to push out where I think we're at with things.
Are you going to record this?
My apologies. Yes, I am recording this meeting.
Okay.
And there were a couple people that were concerned. Henry is joining us. There were couple people that were concerned they weren't able to join during our first time slot. So my practice is to record the meetings and see if we can't get them in the GitHub so people who weren't able to attend can then jump in and try and catch up to speed. So I'm calling this cohort meeting number 1. Some of us who are LiveCode practitioners were able to meet prior to the cohort, but I don't want to put people in the mode where they think they're behind because they missed that. Basically, what we're going to do is the roundtable of introductions, sort of tell each other, I should say, where we're at with things, and I'm learning PowerPoint on the fly here. So I'll go ahead and start off, and then typically what I do is grab a screen grab of the display of things. Now you want to behave funny. This is odd. So let's see if I can do that before we go much further. And I'm switching over to notes, which is the preferred way to capture these things. So I see Henry, welcome. I see Peter, welcome. So bear with me. I'll switch back to PowerPoint and then we'll be able to proceed here. Good. So again, my name is Brian Duck. I'm located in Plymouth, Michigan, which is Eastern Standard Time, I believe. xAPI, this is my fourth cohort. I've led Team-MakeyMakey in the past, and I'm going to take you through a bit of the architecture of that. And I'm still learning xAPI, still trying to understand the components and how they work together. And in my LiveCode experience, I've actually been a LiveCode enthusiast for over a decade. But in terms of my programming knowledge, I've built a few very simple stacks or a few very simple applications. I've actually pushed 1 or 2 of them out to either an iPad or a MacBook. I haven't quite tested things on Windows or Android, so that's sort of where I'm at. Let me switch back to the static view of people. Izzy, it looks like I've got you next. Could I have you talk to the slides?
Sure, yeah. So some of you may remember me from the cohort, that very first one, if you got a chance to go. But again, if you haven't, my name is Izzy. I am based in New Jersey, so Eastern time zone as well. I have, I guess I've sort of been a part of the cohort for a while now, multiple cohorts. I've led a couple of projects, and now I work as a data engineer at Watershed. So, you know, I'm working with xAPI a lot. And as far as my live code experience, though, that's kind of what I'm interested in, because I don't have any experience with it, but I did find a quick like 3-minute video about it, and it looked interesting, so I just kind of wanted to learn more. I've been a developer before, so I've done some coding in Java and Python, so you know, it just seemed like an interesting application.
So Andrew, you're next. Martin, you're in the batter's box, so to speak. On deck.
I'm Andrew Bell from Indianapolis, Indiana, Eastern time zone. This is my first xAPI experience. I hopped into one of these calls before, but I'm just interested in sort of anything API based. Also interested in sort of how this ties in education wise. I have been using LiveCode for about 6 or 7 years in my own side business, but I also am using it now in my day-to-day. I work for Indiana University, so I'm doing some educational software development, productivity stuff in-house, but also out-of-house. I've got some commercial projects going right now. So iOS, Android, Mac, and PC distribution. So kind of curious to sort of tie all this stuff together and sort of have some people to pick brains with.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I'm glad you were able to make it. We've been trying to connect for a while. Martin?
Hi. So as far as LiveCode, I've been involved, like I've used HyperCard and made some video stacks with HyperCard, and then HyperCard got killed, and then I discovered LiveCode. Then I've been using and sort of continued those stacks on to become an application, a full application, which my most recent accomplishment is getting it ported to Windows, because I've been Mac only, and so struggling through how Windows files or programs are set up and that. As far as xAPI, one of the ideas I had for my program, because what it does is annotates video for doing training with students for the, you know, to do marking of their videos or for interpreting, sign language interpreting. And I wanted to integrate that with an LMS, and I thought of, I found SCORM and then TinCan, and then now it's xAPI. So that's kind of what I'd like to do is figure out more about xAPI and the video profile, which I just learned about, and you know, continue on learning more about that.
Awesome. So Martin, just to prompt you, you're in Toronto, which is also Eastern?
Okay. Yeah, Eastern time.
Okay.
Eastern. Yeah.
Let me try that route. There we go. So Martin, Helen, you're up next with Peter on deck.
Great, thank you. And my name is Helen Lenane. I'm an instructional designer. I'm located in New Mexico, but I work Eastern Standard Hours, which I'm always doing the math. And sometimes I get confused when I'm subtracting and adding between different time zones with team members and all over. My xAPI experience is really limited. I know the power of what it can do and the data that can be retrieved, and the, you know, making informed decisions about training and learning solutions, but I haven't been able to convince or convey a message in my current position as to the benefits. So I thought if I learn more about the code, the JavaScript, and having this experience, I would be able to provide more background information. And this is my 4th xAPI cohort, and I'm always learning from the guest speakers and Brian and his team with MakeyMakey. I reached out to him and I said, I'm so appreciative that you give an update each week on, how your team is progressing. So a couple of cohorts before, I reached out to him. And again, great experience. LiveCode experience, I'm going to be your range at the far end of the novice, so you have a range. So I'm really excited about being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. You're welcome to be here. Peter, and then...
Yes, hi, I'm Peter.
Your name. I want to say Ryan. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, I'm Peter Bogdanoff. I'm in California in the mountains north of Los Angeles. And so that would be Pacific. And xAPI, I have not, this is brand new to me. And I'm looking forward to it because otherwise, LiveCode, I've been using LiveCode for 7-8 years, and then before that, HyperCard, way back in the early 90s, I was working on CD-ROM programs with music education, at the Voyager company. They were a pioneer with interactive stuff for humanities. And and I worked with a UCLA professor. We've been working together for like 30 years, and we now have a company, and we're publishing a music education software textbook, and both for individual users and for use in college music classes, music history, music theory, literature, music appreciation, and we've been getting going, actually publishing that from desktop for Mac and Windows, and we're now launching with a publisher in China, and so with all that, just as a desktop application, people are asking the instructors are asking about, integrating with their LMS and so on and so on and so on, and also getting exams going, and so my experience had been with desktop applications, and so this is the LMS, and that idea is a whole new world for me. And so this xAPI thing came up, and this is great, and I'm looking forward to learning and applying to what I'm doing.
Thank you, Henry. Apologies. Thank you, Peter. Henry, if you could go next.
Sure. I'm Henry Ring. I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I guess it's Mountain Standard Time. We don't change time zones, so we're always missing meetings. xAPI experience. So I have a small business. We're in the e-learning space. We do have some LMS technologies, things that are scoring based. And as far as like learning record stores, we are using some of the open source and figuring out how to do proxies in front of it, so we could listen to traffic and do things with CMA5. So I have a clue. I can't say that my clients are currently not using xAPI. We have a storyline and other things that will generate those statements, and we're generating those statements with experimentation, and we're doing something with firefighters now where there's a need for it. But in production, we don't have customers that are using xAPI at the moment. And LiveCode, first, Brian, I very much appreciate you reaching us. I think you're a great coordinator for these types of groups. Somehow you cast that net and dragged me in, which is fine. I'm happy to be here. So
I appreciate it.
And you keep things going, so that's good. So LiveCode was one of my, I I didn't know what that was when you mentioned it. I just went to the webpage and I said, oh, I think right now I'm looking at what am I going to use? Like in the past, we used I forgot what that Adobe product was that would they had a JavaScript library and would create apps out of it. I forgot what that was.
Is that Adobe Flex?
It wasn't Flex. It was their package or PhoneGap, right? And then now I have a colleague that wants me to learn Google Flutter for cross-platform. I never really got momentum with Xamarin. Is that the Microsoft version of that? And then I saw LiveCode and I thought, well, I should have a clue or some hands-on experience with it, so I'd like to know what that is.
Yeah, there's definitely some value there, so we would recommend you look at it. And if you haven't looked at livecode.com, they're actually running a promotion that is ending soon, sometime today, within the next hour possibly, about their next event. They're trying to set up a virtual conference for 2021 and a live in-person conference in New York City in 2022. So, Martin, are you telling me it ended?
No, 15 minutes left.
Okay, so open up a browser and take a look at that. If you're interested, there may be some discounts in the training and some other options. And then I'm working to scroll through our attendance roster here. I believe we've got one other person that joined that hasn't introduced themselves, or did they check out again? Is there anybody that hasn't gone? I'll just put it that way. Okay, it looks like they dropped, so I'm not sure who that was, but my apologies if we lost somebody. Again, I'm in presentation mode in PowerPoint, so I can't necessarily see the waiting room. So let me take a look and see if that is active. Sorry, I'm sort of fidgeting with a few things here. So stop share. I see a couple things in chat. Thank you for that. Martin put a link out there to the activity. And then I want to pull up the participants list. There we go. Okay, let's continue on. Go back to share. Desktop. Share. All right. So, well, this didn't work out the way I'd hoped, obviously. So, one of the things I wanted to talk to people about who are new to xAPI, and obviously my graphic needs a little more work than the copy and paste I was hoping would work for us, is I found a document titled the xAPI Guide for Technical Implementers. It's an IEEE LTSC tag xAPI document. So that's IEEE LTSC TAG xAPI. It was published in June of 2018. And on page 8, they talk about 3 different components. And I want to sort of frame things for people who are new to this approach in those 3 different components. So there's a learning record provider, which I'm representing here by a square, a learning record store, which I'm representing by a triangle, and then there's
your
a
screen
circle.
share dropped off. We're not seeing your slide deck anymore.
My apologies.
I am.
Or is it? Okay.
Yeah, I can still see it. It's just a little.
Right,
I think the words are a little blurry, but
let me
it's
see
okay.
if I can escape out and resize. I think if I resize across the screen, it's
Actually, I think as long as we don't have to read the slides, yeah, we're okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So, well, I'm gonna move past that. But the idea is there's 3 different components: the provider, the store, and the learning record consumer. And what we're focused on for this project is building a learning record provider. And this one's a little more clear, so I'm going to stay on this graphic. But for Team-MakeyMakey, what we did was we built a LiveCode app that connected this joystick you see down here in the lower left. And the idea was it's sending keyboard commands through a device called the MakeyMakey, which is a printed circuit board, into LiveCode, LiveCode is running as an application on the computer, and it's connecting to a web server which has HTML, CSS, JavaScript libraries, and it's running this on a web server. And the web server actually runs out there and talks to the learning record provider when you send a statement. So my goal, the reason I'm working to pull this team together, is to sort of simplify that. We don't really need to be focused on the makey for this side of things, the joystick or the keyboard or the arcade button input is not really the focus. So we're focused in on LiveCode. And one of the things that I have as a personal goal is to try and remove the dependence on an external server. So I want to pull the JavaScript, the LiveCode, the JavaScript, the CSS, and the JavaScript libraries, as well as the HTML, into LiveCode and have it work as a standalone application. So that is one of my goals for this project. And if I can help people understand what LiveCode does and the value of it, that is a secondary goal for me. And then the other thing we've talked about, the technique that I used to pull in some of the people, was I responded to a post on the LiveCode listserv, which was actually titled CMI5 in LiveCode. And CMI5 is a xAPI, I want to say portfolio. Izzy, help me. xAPI
yeah,
profile.
so CMI5, it's a profile. Yeah.
There's the word I'm looking for. So it's a specific profile within xAPI, meaning it has a minimal vocabulary relative to xAPI. One of the things I did was I pulled out, there's a reference page that the ADL puts out that has all the vocabulary entries on it. I pulled that into a database and I wound up with more than 800 entries. Now there's some redundancy there, there's some priorities there, there's also these profiles. And the idea is, if you focus in on a specific profile, your vocabulary can be minimized to what's needed just to implement that profile. And down here in the lower left, there are 9 different vocabulary, or 10, I forget the count, different vocabulary terms that are sort of the minimum for CMI5. And Martin mentioned the idea of the video profile. I don't have a graphic of that, but it's a similar approach. It's a minimalization of the vocabulary. It allows you to focus in on what you want to do with the tool. So where we're sort of at is the philosophy is we want to build a LiveCode project that works as a learning record provider. Again, I'm working to try and internalize these pieces. Now, the other thing I should mention is there's definitely more people involved in this than were available on this call. And one of the key players from the UK, from London, UK, as opposed to London, Ontario, is David Brule, who's a LiveCode programmer. I think I may have butchered his last name, but he's a LiveCode programmer, and he is interested in rebuilding a LiveCode project that does not depend on any JavaScript libraries, that is able to talk directly to a learning record store and act as a learning record provider by sending statements directly from LiveCode. And once we get him in sync with us for the timing of the meetings, I was hopeful he would be on this one because this one's sort of early in his day. But I'm hopeful he'll be able to jump in and sort of take the reins with building that piece out. And our goal is to try and build these learning record providers like within half the time of the cohort, within about 6 weeks, and provide them on the GitHub as a starter project for other people to use. So that's the end of my PowerPoint, but not the end of the discussion. The idea is that once we have these starter projects, anyone would be able to go out and get a license for LiveCode at livecode.org. Just be aware there's livecode.com and livecode.org, and .org is an open source version of LiveCode. It is downloadable and executable for free. There are some limitations, and one of the limitations is the number of platforms you can go out to. And then there's an in-between step between the commercial, or the business license, I should say, and the .org license, which is referred to as Indie, and it's a little more approachable in terms of pricing. The idea is if you have less than, I think, $500,000 in revenue or 100,000 clients, or there's some numbers that they put in there, you can qualify for an Indie license at a lower price point and move beyond the open source version quickly. So if you're interested, if you're trying to understand what LiveCode can do for you, I would say to look at livecode.org as a starting point, but definitely look at the licensing on livecode.com. You want to be aware of that. If you're, as Henry mentioned, if he's looking at it for commercial use in the long run, you definitely want to spec out those licensing. Let me pause for a breath and any questions. Martin put another pricing URL in here.
So for purposes of just this cohort, it's okay to use the free open source version? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So again, our goal is to publish a version that is open source and available for use with the livecode.org version, the open source version. And the project that I did for MakeyMakey, I did that as well. The project for MakeyMakey is available for use with LiveCode, with open source LiveCode. I did not add any features in during that project, but I may do that later. And that's part of what we're working with Megan Torrance and the team at Torrance Learning, is to understand what the licensing expectations are for projects that we put in the GitHub. Andrew, it looks like he got kicked, so I'm going to let him back in. Andrew, welcome back. Any other questions? Martin, I think we're at the threshold for your other meeting. Do you have anything to add in case you have to jump off?
Yeah, just one last thing I have to go. But I was on Team Zoom the last time, and the way it worked was we all wanted to do something with Zoom, and it had an API, and we wanted to hook it up. So it took us maybe about 3 or 4 meetings amongst all of us to come up with what we wanted to do, like what was available in the API, what kind of features we wanted to do, and that. So there was negotiation among. So I think this one still should keep that idea that we can sort of work out what we want to do, within under Brian's original goal, but there might be some, things so that everyone feels they're getting something out of that. I think that, I don't know how you feel about that, Brian, if that's still
ideally I would want, each of you to have some expectation that you're able to pick up and run with what we produce, even if you run in a different direction. And what I should say we've talked about, again, I met with some of the live coders, and I mentioned David. David had the idea of having this initial sprint be about half the cohort cycle, and then do another sprint that's the later half of the cohort that would allow us to build on our learning record provider as a base and build some content. And Martin has the idea of building something that would allow using the video profile and maybe capturing some of the ideas that he has about, identifying timing and clips and the bits and pieces there. Yeah. So go ahead, Martin.
I think that's a good way of doing it is like what the other thing that we realized is you have to be, depending on people's time. And if lots of people have lots of time, then maybe we can do more. This one, there was one developer who could really code JavaScript and do all of the hooking up. So he was the one that did most of the work, and the rest of us weren't that versed in that. So depending on resources, but it's just gauging what our deliverables would be. So, but I'd like the idea of like sort of this minimal viable product after 6 weeks that can be built upon, so that people can contribute to that and then maybe branch out in other directions. And then the ultimate thing is to do something that can be presented at the end of the course, like at the end of the cohort for the last 2 weeks. So we can have a 15-minute time, and then once that's done, they have a party at the end, but you could get a 45-minute slot. So if we wanted to have different people show their pieces of it, give everyone like 10 minutes or something, just so that people who are going different directions still have a way to showcase their work or something. So those are my only comments for now. But I got to jump out, and let me know when the next meeting is and all that. And hello to everyone again, Henry and Peter and Izzy and Andrew. And hopefully chat again. Okay, bye.
Bye, Martin.
Bye-bye.
So we have the warning that we're under 10 minutes at this point. Let's just do a round robin. And I'm going to add not a link, but a mention of the document that I talked about, xAPI Guide for Technical Implementation. It's a good document for getting started. There's some detail that it gets into the latter part of the document that is, as far as I'm concerned, very in-depth. So I've sort of been reading through it in stages and repeat process, but if you haven't seen that, it's a good place to start. Let's just go around and ask for comments, maybe goals that you're thinking of trying to get started. Is your first up on the screen? You have something in mind?
I would say just for me, it's mainly about getting familiar with LiveCode and sort of just figuring out how we can send statements from it to the record, LRS.
Right.
Because even just that part involves figuring out what types of statements we want to send, constructing the statements, getting the right data into those statements. So there's plenty there that provides fodder for discussion.
Yep. Understood. Peter, how about yourself?
I would like to learn how to similar to what Izzy said about communicating outside of LiveCode into the LRS, and specifically for student comments, projects, notes, things like that. And what I like some point, if you would, someone would explain overall what LiveCode is doing with as the provider to the record store. What's happening technically there, and how is it communicating, and how's it being stored? What's the storage? The storage. How is that set up? This kind of overall picture of, I have no idea what's other than the titles.
Okay. I can give you some links to videos that I did in some of the early process. Thanks, Izzy. Izzy put a link to that document. I appreciate that. So for Team-MakeyMakey, we were using a library called the xAPI wrapper that is provided by the ADL. So it is a JavaScript wrapper that sits with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and takes and builds a JSON variable and sends that out as a statement to the LRS. And frankly, once you set that up, I set that up on a web server. Once you set that up, and part of it is putting in a name and password, if you will, for the Learning Records store. Once you've done that, you really don't have to go in and edit it that much. So as a library, you're setting it up, configuring it, and then it's working behind the scenes. So I can pull up a web page that lets me send that statement and then share that information. So let's go ahead and get through a couple more comments and see if we still have time for that. I think we'll probably be running short of time, but we might be able to tackle that in the next session. Henry, do you have any personal goals?
No, technically in LiveCode, and I won't say I'm a professional hack, but I would probably I would expect that I'd go into LiveCode and there'd be some button that I'm clicking on, and then I'd figure out, and there were participants figuring out how can you post the xAPI statement to an endpoint to the LRS, and you'd work through like the OAuth or whatever the header needs to be to get to LRS. So it'd be, a hard-coded, I'm sending a statement that successfully leaves here, and that's pretty much easier to work through and understand. And then back to your example, Brian, when you're starting sending a series of statements, you've already taken out the variable of can I talk to the LRS. It's just like at that point, it's how do you want to use it. So, I've worked in different languages, so that's usually my technique of just trying to brute force, get it to talk to the LRS, see it happen once, and then understand what needs to be dynamic about it, the user ID, and the statements that you're sending.
Okay. Andrew, how about yourself? Do you have any personal goals you want to speak about?
Definitely want to get more familiar with APIs in LiveCode. I've been able to connect with a couple different ones, like Twitter and Untapped and a couple others for work already. Each one has a different set of rules to make that authentication. So just the more I can get familiar with those, I'll be happy. At IU, we have Canvas as our LMS, and so I have a Canvas developer account as well. Last year I was able to get some productivity stuff started using the Canvas API, but I was never able to get it executed outside of Postman. So again, being able to get into LiveCode, get all that authentication, I really think I got a chance to use this for both my day and night job.
Yeah, so that would be a challenge. Helen, how about you?
Thank you, Brian. For me, it's going to be just a deeper dive into understanding LiveCode and mapping between LiveCode and the xAPI vocabulary. And just like you said earlier, how that could talk directly to an LRP. And mostly just to be able to understand the discussions that you'll have. I've just learned a lot even in this one session. So those are just some of my goals.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. Well, what I'm doing in the background here is I'm trying to log into Zoom and see if I can extend our session. Can I just ask a raise of hands? Are you able to continue on for another half an hour?
I'm raising my hand.
Okay, maybe. Maybe one or two. All right. So I guess I would say that the need for that is questionable. So what I'll do is I'll follow up with an email rather than trying to extend our Zoom and build another meeting time. We'll just go ahead and wrap this up shortly. We've got less than a minute, so let me just finish by saying I'll follow up with an email and put out a link to the xAPI wrapper and the duckworks.biz, which is my personal domain webpage that uses that. And Peter, you were the one that sort of mentioned wanting to see the behind the scenes. I don't know if you have HTML chops to view source and take a look at that, but that is one of the options. The xAPI wrapper is out there in GitHub. You can search for that. It's provided by the ADL, and there are documents within that GitHub section that would allow you to see the source and see the details of how that is used. And again, I have the working demo on the Duckworks webpage that I can link to. But we're running short of time, so I don't know that I can build a link to that in the meantime. Let me see what I can do here.
All right, Brian. Well, thank you. Feel free to just post it in the Slack channel if you don't get a chance.
Well, I got it there in the...
there you go.
I got it there in the... I'm surprised, but I got it there in the chat. But okay. I can also follow up in Slack. And you can take a look at that. Unfortunately, I can't really research the GitHub API URL that quickly, but Duckworks is listed in my memory for my browser, so I was able to jump into that. And basically on that page, if you type a WASD, one of the letters for the controller, you are sending a statement, and the section, you'll get a JavaScript alert saying you've done that. The section will be updated showing the data. it's replaced with this ID, and then the JSON is updated. So that concludes what we have time for today. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.